If your radio plays static, the radio isn't broken, you just lost the signal. Today we're critiquing a script on the CIA's 1983 Gateway process and the idea that human consciousness is just a receiver.
Right. It's a fantastic premise.
It is, but let's just jump right in. A rigorous exploration of heterodox scientific theories requires a sturdy acknowledgement of the mainstream consensus it aims to disrupt.
Yeah, and right now, this script completely ignores modern neuroscience.
It really does.
The weakness here is that it treats the 1983 holographic brain theory and the whole receiver model of consciousness as these unassailable facts uncovered by a lone analyst.
I noticed that right away. It completely sidesteps the massive body of modern electrochemical neuroscience that actually supports the generator model.
Right, the idea that the brain generates consciousness.
Exactly. By framing that inherited belief of consciousness as brain output, simply as an untested cultural assumption, the narrative inadvertently weakens its own credibility.
Yeah. Looking at my notes, the text explicitly claims this assumption was never tested and just inherited.
Which is such a massive rhetorical trap, you know?
Oh, absolutely.
You risk alienating critical thinkers who know perfectly well that the generator model is backed by decades of verifiable medical science.
Well, wait, I can see a writer pushing back on this, though. Like, if the entire point of the script is to challenge the mainstream and prove the brain is just a receiver, why do they need to spend valuable real estate validating the exact opposite theory?
Right.
Doesn't that just confuse the argument?
Not if you frame it correctly. It's about building trust.
Okay.
Presenting this theory without acknowledging modern neurology is like explaining quantum mechanics while pretending Newtonian physics doesn't exist to govern our everyday reality.
Oh, that's a really good point.
Yeah, like if I drop my coffee mug right now, it shatters on the floor. Newtonian physics works perfectly for that macro environment. And similarly, modern neurology works brilliantly for the physical brain.
Right. Anyone who has ever seen a family member's personality change from, say, a traumatic brain injury.
Exactly.
They know for a fact that the physical brain generates our local reality.
So the suggestion here is to integrate the modern scientific consensus not as a naive illusion to be discarded, but as a formidable functioning paradigm that the Gateway process attempts to look beyond.
Right. So we contrast the biological utility of the generator model with the existential implications of the receiver model.
Yes. How can we honor the undeniable successes of modern brain science while still making space for McDonnell's findings? We make McDonnell's divergence feel like a daring leap rather than a dismissal of basic science.
I love that. It's essentially steel manning the opposing argument before you dismantle it.
Precisely. You're telling the reader your model isn't wrong, it's just incomplete.
So let's give some concrete examples for this. We need to establish this contrast early on.
Yeah, I think they could add a sequence right around the introduction of Hemispheres, a sequence acknowledging that the electrochemical byproduct model is highly effective.
Right, mention that it successfully cures diseases, it maps trauma,
and reliably predicts human behavior.
Exactly. You could use a phrasing like, modern neurology has successfully mapped the generator down to the individual synapse, proving it governs our physical reality.
Oh, I like that.
But McDonnell wasn't trying to map the wiring of the radio. He was trying to prove the existence of the broadcast itself.
That is a fantastic pivot. It's so intellectually robust. It completely shifts the tone of the narrative from a lecture into an invitation.
Yeah, we're inviting the reader to peek past the edges of a very successful biological framework.
Which just makes the subsequent dive into the esoteric material feel so much more grounded.
Definitely.
Speaking of which, relying on bureaucratic redaction as the ultimate source of mystery undermines the profound philosophical questions raised by the text itself.
Ah, you're talking about the missing page 25?
Yes, the section detailing the absolute.
Right. The weakness here is that the climax of the script heavily leverages this missing page as a deliberate, sensitive institutional cover-up.
I have to admit, that framing really bumped me.
It dips right into a conventional conspiracy trope. We've spent minutes building up these deeply profound existential themes about the nature of the self and the illusion of time.
And the holographic universe, yeah.
Right. And to then pivot and rely on the idea that someone in a suit locked the truth in a filing cabinet, it just cheapens the whole thing.
Well, let me play devil's advocate for a second.
Sure.
A missing page in a highly classified military document naturally screams cover-up, right? Isn't that exactly what an audience watching a mystery about the CIA wants? Like the smoking gun?
It is what they expect, but it's not what serves the story best. By asking the audience, what did someone decide you shouldn't read, the author shifts the genre.
Yeah, it moves abruptly from an intellectual exploration of reality to a standard spy thriller.
Exactly. It shrinks the scope of the mystery to something terribly mundane. We are literally standing at the precipice of the absolute, looking into the infinite void of human consciousness.
And suddenly we're worried about a low-level CIA clerk with a black marker.
Right. When you put it like that, it feels like a massive letdown. It takes a cosmic question and reduces it to an administrative dispute.
So I challenge you, how do we find a more conceptually satisfying way to interpret this missing? What's the suggestion here?
We need to pivot the framing of page 25 from a deliberate government secret to a symbolic representation of the structural impossibility of language.
The structural impossibility of language. Break that down for me.
Well, think about what the absolute actually is in this context. It's a state of being where the distinction between observer and observed completely collapses.
Right, no inside, no outside.
No time, no space. It is infinite. Now, think about the medium of the message. This is a military intelligence report.
It relies on syntax, bullet points, linear logic.
Exactly. We should use the missing page as a thematic device to illustrate what happens when an intelligence agency tries to classify the ineffable.
Oh, wow. So it becomes a metaphor for the absolute limits of human comprehension.
Yeah, an everyday analogy might be trying to explain the color red to someone who has been completely blind since birth.
Right. No matter how many technical terms you use about light wavelengths, the language simply fails to capture the experience.
Exactly. And in this case, the language didn't just fail, the format itself broke down.
I really love this approach. It turns a clerical absence into a poetic presence.
It makes the missing page an active participant in the story, rather than just a passive redacted space.
So for our concrete examples, how do we weave this into the script organically?
Well, instead of asking, what did someone decide you shouldn't read, explore the paradox of the document itself. Ask the audience, how does a military analyst format the complete dissolution of space and time into a bulleted briefing?
Oh, that's incredibly evocative.
Right?
Suggest portraying the missing page as the exact point where the standard intelligence reporting format simply shatters.
You frame the absence not as a malicious cover-up, but as the only accurate way to represent the absolute.
Yes, a blank page or a missing page is structurally the only way to document infinity.
It elevates the entire piece. It reinforces the core tension of the script, which is the collision of cold, hard government analysis with mind-expanding metaphysical reality.
It is the ultimate irony. The intelligence community's sole purpose is to gather and quantify data, but the absolute is, by definition, unarticulable.
So the silence of page 25 actually becomes the loudest, most accurate part of the entire report.
And honestly, that breakdown of language is a perfect transition into our final area of focus.
Yes, because that struggle is a struggle the script itself faces when describing the various stages of the gateway process.
Sustaining an objective, analytical tone through deeply subjective material requires continuously tethering abstract experiences to their stated physical mechanism.
This is absolutely vital for the pacing and tone. And right now, the weakness is glaring. When the script transitions into describing the specific focus states.
Focus 10, Focus 12, Focus 15, and Focus 21.
Right. It gradually abandons the previously established mechanical framework of hemosync and brainwave interference patterns.
The descriptions just drift into purely mystical territory. It loses the unique intelligence analyst perspective that made the initial premise so compelling.
It's a very noticeable tonal shift. We start the journey talking about grounded concepts, audio frequencies, hemosync synchronization.
Holographic decoding, yeah.
But by the time we hit Focus 15, the script suddenly feels like it moves from an engineering manual to a guided meditation.
We're suddenly reading phrases like the present moment becoming the only moment and expanding beyond the physical shell.
Right.
But let me push back on that for a sec. Is it really a structural weakness if the experience itself is inherently subjective and mystical?
Well,
I mean, once you hit Focus 15, you are supposedly entirely outside the bounds of time. How do you keep talking about acoustic interference patterns when the person in the tank is experiencing eternity?
I hear what you're saying.
Wouldn't sticking to the technical jargon ruin the majesty of what's happening?
Not if you do it right. In fact, abandoning the technical jargon is what ruins the majesty. Think about what makes this document fascinating. If I'm reading a CIA report on a stealth aircraft, I don't want the analyst writing poetry about touching the face of God in the clouds.
You want to know the aerodynamic threshold that allows the titanium frame to disappear from enemy radar.
Exactly. The friction between the clinical language of a military analyst and the profoundly spiritual nature of the experience is the engine that drives this narrative.
Ah, I see. If you abandon the clinical language, you lose the friction, and the engine just stalls out.
Yeah, without that technical tether, the later focus states risk sounding like a transcript from a generic internet New Age seminar.
It forgets the machine that got us there, so the suggestion is to anchor each focus level description firmly back to the mechanical interference patterns and the loosening of the local channel lock.
Right. We need to maintain McDonnell's tuning procedure metaphor throughout the entire progression, ensuring that every abstract state is grounded in the language of physics and frequency.
So we don't lose the poetry of the experience, but we violently filter it through the vocabulary of the analyst.
Exactly. Let's look at some concrete examples of what that filtered vocabulary looks like. Take Focus 15, the state of no time.
Right, the script needs to explicitly link that vast feeling back to the audio frequencies that induce it.
Right now, it just says something like, you're in a different register. That's too vague. The author could revise it to something much more clinical.
Maybe something like, at the specific frequency of Focus 15, the brain's artificially induced interference pattern phase shifts entirely out of the time-space wavelength.
Oh, phase shifts entirely out of the time-space wavelength. That is perfect.
It gives you the mind-bending reality, but it sounds like a diagnostic reading.
And what about when we reach Focus 21? The text currently calls it the boundary of physical reality.
The edge of the hologram. We should describe that using the vocabulary of a decaying signal lock. We need to remind the reader that the physical brain is actually losing its grip on the local broadcast.
So instead of just saying, the soul steps to the edge of the physical world, you say something like, at Focus 21, the neurological signal degradation reaches its maximum threshold before complete detachment.
Yes, it relentlessly injects terms like signal degradation and wave interference into these ethereal states.
It reminds the audience exactly why this specific classified document is so unique and, frankly, so dangerous to the status quo.
It grounds the surreal in the procedural. When the reader feels like they are reading a dry, classified spec sheet about the complete dissolution of their own ego.
That is a uniquely chilling reading experience. We want to protect that specific, highly clinical tone at all costs.
It makes the impossible feel undeniable.
Absolutely.
Well, to wrap up this critique, the material possesses a deeply compelling premise, but can achieve a much higher level of sophistication by refining its structural focus.
Right. The main takeaways are three things. First, acknowledge and validate mainstream neuroscience to make the alternative theory more robust.
Elevate the missing page 25 from a conspiracy trope to a philosophical statement on the limits of language.
And third, fiercely maintain the vocabulary of physics and engineering when describing the abstract focus levels.
Implementing these adjustments will create a seamless, intellectually airtight journey for the audience. We genuinely look forward to seeing how this script evolves, and we warmly invite you to submit your revised work for another round of feedback in the future.
It really is a phenomenal piece of foundational material. With these structural adjustments to the dial, the transmission is going to come through loud and clear.
Exact, because at the end of the day, when you're trying to prove that the music isn't generated by the plastic box, you can't just ignore the circuitry. You have to prove that the signal is coming from everywhere all at once.